Hello, everyone. Big welcome to everyone. It's so good to see all of you on the line tonight. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owner of the land on which we meet today. I would like to also pay my respect to their elders, past and present. Um, Thank you for coming along to tonight's Ask Me Anything series session. This session today is really designed to highlight Antler's founder's journey and to answer your questions about it. I'm Rani, comedian scouting at Antler Australia. Also in the call are James, Liam, and Rachel from the Antler team. Tonight, we will have James McClure, partner at Antler Australia, sitting down with two of our very own corporate executives turned startup founders, Joe from Enrolla and Dom from Marvelous. Both of them have successfully built and launched their company with us. Also, to let everyone know, this AMA is part of a series we have had throughout April to July to shed more light on the diversity of experience and profile of founders we back and their journey with Antler. We have one more upcoming next month, spotlighting our migrant founders. So count yourself into that one as well if you're interested in hearing more. Alrighty, I'll pass this shortly to James to do an introduction about Antler and moderate today's session. But before we kick off, I just want to go over some general housekeeping for everyone. Again, this is an Ask Me Anything session. So at any point of the conversation, feel free to contribute by addressing your question or comments in the comment section. We'll also have dedicated time for your Q&A at the end of the session to answer any of your burning questions. And also throughout the panel discussion, please mute yourself if you're not speaking, just to avoid any background noise. And if possible, would love to see your faces. So keep your camera turned on so we can see who we're speaking to online tonight. All right, and now let's get into it. James, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Ronnie. And I really want to appreciate everyone giving up a bit of time to come talk to us. There's many ways that you can find great founders. There's lots of different areas that people are looking for, like founder DNA, spikes in certain areas, second-time founders, all the rest of it. But like where you find great domain expertise, huge amounts of skill, particularly on sales, product development, often is corporates, and this can come in like all range and shapes and sizes. And we've got a few examples on the call today from Joe and Dom and myself. But what I'll do is like the goal of that is to really give you a bit of an insight as to really what does it feel like and why, what you should consider if when you want to take the plunge, and what does it look like a few years, like a few sort of months and years on. Well, I'll start with just a bit of an overview as to Antler, how we operate, and then we'll get into it with Joe and Dom. So what you will be able to see going on, we'll have a quick intro to a panel, and then we'll have open Q&A on anything you want to do. So either please raise the hand or ask in the chat, and we'll cover it. So overall, Antler, like we're a global VC firm. We run programs in like 30 cities around the world. We've got over 4 billion of assets under management and have made like a large amount of investments in Australia. We're located in Sydney and Melbourne. We'll be in Brisbane next year. We're still doing a bunch of work there. We've made over 100 investments thus far, over 100 million Aussie like under management. All in all, this means we're one of the most active, but also one of the most like respected early stage venture investors. One of the things which we do that most other VCs don't do is lead rounds. We put our conviction behind entrepreneurs at idea, concept, pre-revenue stage, when many others will go, like you're a bit too early for us, come back later. And what we're looking for and what makes us a big value proposition that we provide is that we're trying to bring a group of, let's call it 80 founders together twice a year who've got a variety of different experiences to create that surface area for unfair advantages going after really cool problems to emerge. There's three kind of archetypes here, which I'll give examples of each. So there's tech product builders, business and operators, and then domain experts. Who would be good? This is my favorite bit, talking about founders that we've invested in. So let's talk about Ksenia in the tech product builders. So she was high pages in Atlassian, one extremely well-known ASX listed company, and one also pretty strong ASX listed company. Tactic is a like voice transcription for calls. They're going through a Series A process at the moment with some quite cool US investors, and her and Alex have been building that business for the last like 4 years, and one of our more successful ones. in business and operators, let's talk about Amit, who runs SaaS Guru. So this is it's an L&D platform to enable you to become more confident and competent and get certified in a bunch of SaaS products, leveraging a lot of his consulting skills at Capgemini and Wipro. And then who should I talk? Let's talk about Cap. So Trace is a carbon accounting platform aimed at small businesses. This really came from her domain expertise at Macquarie, about as corporate as it comes, on renewable energy products. And this has been like one of the first investments that we made, and again, like a real strong, successful area. On the right, you can see some logos where people are. I think typically an important one is to get some of this like domain expertise and real like insights to an industry. That typically means people are more experienced, and so that an average work experience in and around a decade is representative of people that have seen a good amount, and probably is the people who are looking at jumping off points in their career to be able to have seen enough things in their corporate life to mean that they've actually can see a big problem that they want to go and solve and work for themselves, not for someone else. Here's a flavor of the types of companies that we've backed. Like the logos, you can probably tell that everyone's got a similar logo developer, although we don't actually recommend those, but everyone's got the same end of like a font. But the more important bit here is we're vertical agnostic. One of the bits of the process we go through is trying to find great individuals and then allow great teams with insights to form, rather than we say, hey, look, can everyone just build some SaaS because we like some SaaS, please? By the way, we do like SaaS. Dom is a B2B SaaS founder himself, but like we're a place where there's commercialized PhD projects, there's deep tech. We look at things in space and other areas, and the value to how we overcome some of the challenges of not necessarily being market experts in absolutely everything is actually the process that we go through working with you all to be able to help validate alongside you where there are some great areas, and bringing some of the transferable skills and advice that come from different industries and cross-pollinating is where there's a real big value, both that we can deliver, but also what you will get from the other 80 or so people in the cohort with you. And some of the results of this, three to talk about, Path Zero. So all of the companies we're about to talk about, they're kind of in the sort of Series A stage. Some quite interesting sort of select investors off to the side, including like a who's who of Australia, as well as some international investors. Path Zero is carbon accounting for like private wealth managers. Carl ran his own hedge fund and exited that, and then came to join Antler. He met his CTO Charbel in the residency, and Charbel's initial idea was something around waste management and a better waste pipe to do sewage, but they actually came together and focused in on this area. Again, it goes to show that there's the balance of what you come in with may not necessarily be how things move along. In insurance, Upcover, they're like the leading SMB broker for insurance. You can underwrite a product in seconds with them. Sky's the CEO, a self-proclaimed insurance tragic. She worked at Zurich Re and a bunch of other places. She would claim that she's one of the 10 people that knows the most about insurance in Australia. In reality, it's probably in the top 2 or 3. And the other person who's in that list would be a co-founder, and she recently moved from India. He had previously worked at Goldman, and then was a part of an exit of an Indian startup. And then Zalience in the deep tech space. This is computer vision at the edge. If you were on a Ring doorbell and you wanted facial recognition to know that it's your mail delivery person versus your brother, Zalient would be the way that you could do that without having to call the cloud. This is an example of like someone bringing an idea from university research. Shivi, who's the co-founder, actually joining with Lars, who's an exited entrepreneur. And again, to show that whoever who comes in with the idea doesn't necessarily need to be the CEO. This is often the best combination of people to mean you get that maximum unfair advantage. So what does it look like building with Antler? So going down the left are kind of the stages that people are at, and hopefully you're at least in the first one of apply to Antler, and some of you may well be in the interview stages. But I think more importantly is what happens across the right. So the first half, so the formation and due diligence, is when we talk to you about our residency program, that's what happens in there. And then next round prep, ongoing support, is everything post investment. This is about 10 to 11 weeks. hopefully, if this all goes well, this is 10 to 11 years of building successful businesses. But if I talk on the first like 10 to 11 weeks of what things look like, this first bit is the key. So this is where opportunity to meet potential co-founders, but not just, hey, look, like this person, Joe, seems quite nice when I'm speaking to her over a coffee, but working in design sprints, getting a real chance to work alongside for a short period, as well as like networking. And then we get very much into idea validation and trying to help you come up with and stress test problems to be able to go after. Then the second stage is due diligence, when there's complementary co-founding team with an unfair advantage going after a problem that we think is VC backable. No, I say problem, not that you have the baked solution. We move into the due diligence period where this is much more thematic, but much more like coach and advisor led. So it can be me, it can be one of the other partners, but we're here as like an adjunct to the team to both ask you the hard questions, be an accountability partner, lend our expertise and network, but also get you investment ready, to mean that come IC day, you're on the best chance to be able to get the funding on our fixed terms. But then that relationship just continues onwards through the initial post-investment stage. And it's the first 12 months where we're most active and most involved, because this is where like we're the investor on the cap table alongside you as the founders. So our goal is to mean that like you're able to raise your next round of funding in the first 12 months. That's what we're aiming for. And we get about sort of 70 to 80% like fund through rates on those. And we provide a bunch of support, both in introduction, strategy, but also what's really important to mention is we are a follow-on investor as well. So this isn't one check and done. There's multiple businesses that we've put well over $1 million Aussie into. We back up to Series A in the local fund, and there's an Antler global follow-on fund which goes from Series A to C. So Antler will be a part of your fundraising journey and injecting fresh capital, all things being well, over your first, 6, 7 funding rounds. And you add that to the global nature, and we've helped a lot of businesses localize into Australia and Australian businesses localize elsewhere. It means that global scale is something that's unparalleled from Australian investors at this stage. So with that, I'll talk to some people who've actually been through this process, and they're kind of into section 3 of what I talked about before, and moving on towards global domination and all those other things. So with that, I just want to say thank you to my good friends and sort of founders, Joe and Dom. I just ask each of you to give us a brief intro to your business, but also, given this is corporate execs turned startup founders, like the 30 seconds of what were the headline roles that led you to this stage. You go first, John. Sorry, Joe. I said John. I could have been Doe or John, but Joe, you go first.
Yeah, I was like, that was not helpful.
I know, sorry.
So hi, I am Joe Thomas, and I founded a business called Enroller, which is actually its second name, and we've only been alive for 6 months, at the end of last year. And Enroller is an education comparison site platform. So we really help people find the right vocational course for them. It's a really complicated market. 4.5 million Aussies engage in vocational education every year, and it's tough. And so perhaps because I'm somewhat lacking in creativity, my corporate background was comparison platforms. So iSelect, I was the operations director there and saw it through to IPO on the exec team. And then I spent some time at Compare the Market. And then I ran a higher ed provider. So I was the COO and then the CEO of the Australian Institute of Business, which is the leading provider of MBAs in Australia. And so Enroller was really just, hey, comparison's a really great way to make complicated decisions like education. I'll go and do that. And so I joined Antler with, at its core, that was the idea, and found my co-founder through that process.
And then Dom, I got the name right this time.
Yeah, thanks, James. So my background, I'm a technical guy. So I'm the CTO of Morphless, and we basically save companies who have cloud infrastructure save money through FinOps and various other things. My background is I was a technical person. Probably for the first 5 years, I was a very hands-on software developer type of person. And then I kind of got dragged into the management side of things and started leading bigger teams. And I was in the media industry, building software, building teams. And then most recently, I was working for Nine kind of for the last 6 or 7 years before before kind of going on my own. And there I built a team from we had a kind of a skunkworks project where we built an entire platform from scratch. And I built my team over that time from 0 to 100 people, where I was leading a large dev team with a large budget before kind of heading off on my own.
So it's largely irrational to leave your nicely paying, cushy offices, decent pension plan and benefits and all this other stuff to go and jump into the unknown. Like, help me understand, like, Dom, first, what was I guess, A, what was driving you towards considering it? And then B, was there a particular trigger where you thought, all right, now it's time to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, because it is like corporate life can be, I remember someone calling it a comfortable jail, right? Because, you know, you're locked in with your nice little salary and it's paying the mortgage, but you kind of can't go and do, so you know, you're ultimately working for someone else. When I was kind of going through the ranks, I always wanted to start my own business, and I had previously dabbled in a few things. So I was part of a trio where we built something called the Likeable Engine, and we wrote a book that was published on how likes were being distributed across social media. And that was kind of my first foray into building something outside of work. But ultimately what happened was I kind of finished up at 9, where I kind of built this big team. We were kind of going into maintenance mode, and it was kind of getting boring. And I went and ventured on my own because I was kind of relatively set and wanted to start something new. And really my trigger point was to try and start something new. And I tried to launch something myself that was not very successful. Before then, I kind of got into the Antler ecosystem.
And then Joe, like, same question for you. What was the impetus, and what was the moment when you decided to properly make it happen?
I think I'd always wanted to do it, but you end up on a career trajectory, and you know, the money's good and the next opportunity is good, and then you have a mortgage, and so I think it can, you know, to Dom's words, it can be pretty easy to get stuck on a traditional trajectory. I'd been CEO of AIB for a couple of years, and I think 2 things converged. The first was, and again, a bit like Dom, we'd got the business back to a really profitable position, and it was really just keeping the train on the tracks. And I've never really been great at train on tracks. I've been a good either growth person or a fix it. So it's broken and I'll fix it. And so I've always liked the sort of hard run at things rather than the just sit back and take it easy approach. But I also I'd spent a lot of time trying to work out why people did or didn't engage in education. So I would stand there at graduation and I'd wear my sparkly jacket and I would congratulate people for finishing their MBA. But I would know that they were like the 1 or 2%. And so I would hear the stories of how education had changed their lives. But then I was also responsible for enrolling students, and I would see that 99% didn't. And I think that frustration of, well, why don't people engage in education when they know it's going to make a difference in their life, became such a stone in my shoe, that those 2 things converged to, you know what, I'm done with this job. And probably the third was, you know, you just keep getting older. No matter what you do, you just keep getting older. And there was a sense of, if not now, then when? Like, I'm young enough that if I have a crack at this and it fails, I can go and get another grown-up job. But I'm also old enough that I can afford to earn sort of terrible money or no money for a period of time. So if not now, then when? I don't want to be being a founder for my first crack at 60. So if not now, then when? And those 3 things converge to just go, you know what, I'm just going to do it now. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. And I think it's a leap of faith more than anything else.
I think what was interesting, like, drawing the line between both of yours, not just the you know, the if not now then when, and the kind of latent desire, is also the let's call it the entrepreneurial or the scale and growth that both of you have had in your career, that they're very, although different, they're quite transferable skills versus being in the same job for the last like 15 years, which hasn't really changed.
And I think you do get to a point where you get frustrated at having to ask permission, like seeing.
That doesn't sound like you, Joe.
true. Just like seeing that stuff could happen and then having to ask a board or having to bring people on the journey and ask permission to do it. I think you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna, if it fails, it's on me and I'm okay with that. Rather than I didn't get to have a crack, and if it doesn't work, it's because I just got stuck in this thing that no one else would let me do anything else outside of. I think you either have that or you don't, and it gets to a point where it's undeniable. At least for me.
And with we've talked about some of the downsides of corporate life, but like, what have been the things that it really prepared you for in your startup journey? Like, Dom, if I start with you, what are the key things that, apart from both of you wearing blazers, does it prepare you for?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm obviously the technical side of things. So all of the technical skills that I had developed over time were key. But it was kind of scary because I was in a hands-off role, before kind of going on my own. And so there's definitely that voice in the back of your mind that's kind of saying, am I going to be able to pick it up? Am I going to be able to, get back to some of the hands-on stuff? Because when you're a founder, you're very hands-on, right? You've got to do everything. Whether I think in our team, I handle the finance. I'm the CFO, and I'm also the lawyer expert. Obviously, not domains that I have any skills in, but that's I'm the legal department as well. So I guess having the experience in kind of an executive role of running budgets and having more experience across different areas of the business, not just the technical, that helped because I understood how a business ran. And I had been a CTO before. I had seen other departments and knew how to kind of build teams. That I think were kind of the key things. But a lot more hands-on than probably what I'd previously done.
Very cool. And then talking about like coming into Antler, for you, Joe, you explained that your background was the intersection of meta search, comparison, and education, and you're building something in comparison and education. Talk to me about how, like, what happened through your Antler experience around the idea and what you learned and what you sort of approach things with.
So look, I came into Antler probably for two reasons. The first was it was validation for myself and also for my partner, who couldn't believe, because I'm the main earner, so she couldn't believe that I'd like packed in my well-paid job to like just try something new. And so it was, if I can convince somebody to give me money, then maybe it's not a shit idea. And so I came in quite focused on sort of Antler as a form of validation more than anything else. But pretty quickly, I invalidated the idea that I joined with. So I joined really seeing this as a higher education, so university type product, because I had no understanding about a good business versus a VC backable business. And if any of you are considering doing Antler, trying to get your head around that early days is really useful, because VC don't just look for good, profitable businesses, and I was looking to build a good, profitable business. And so higher ed simply didn't have the scale or the ability to validate or prove it out in a way that made that a viable VC backable business. And so we pivoted really quickly to vocational education. So it was enough about what we knew about, but not necessarily sort of what the original plan had been. And I think the second piece was a co-founder. So even before I joined Antler, I paid like an MVP software house to build an MVP in higher ed. And then, of course, it turns out that's a terrible idea, and I have a piece of software. And Antler really hammered home the fact that you needed a co-founder. And I think I came into it with like, yeah, I'll hire people. Because when you come from the corporate world, there's always money. There's cash in the bank, right? So if you need to bring in talent, you just go and hire that person. And I'm not sure where I thought that magical money was going to come from, but anyway, I clearly did. And so finding a technical co-founder who bought into the vision of sort of the domain expertise that I brought, but could actually build it, and having, again, Antler hammer that home, were, I think, the two most important things that were different from when I came in. I thought I'd come in as a solo founder and I would do higher ed, and I would have built it and then tried to sell it. So I would have built the platform, and then I would have gone and done the marketing, and then discovered that it was bad to commercialize it. And I think the really strong focus on validation. So actually go and work out whether this is a problem worth solving, whether solving it is a VC scale business, and don't go and try and do it on your own. With 3 quite significant mental shifts for me coming in, because I was used to running a business, not starting a business.
Very cool. Then Dom, your journey's a little bit different, but like Morphless really came from a lot of your lived experience of challenges. Like talk to me about how you landed on this idea, and particularly how you came to meet the lovely Ian.
Well, I think it's quite interesting because like a lot of technical people, so I actually came into Antler with an idea already formed and launched. I had built a media data visualization tool that I was hoping to sell to media companies. The problem is, like a lot of technical people, I had built a solution looking for a problem. And that was a problem because I was finding it hard to commercialize the idea, and the market wasn't quite there. And when I joined Antler, the thing that I found really helpful, even though I'd had lots of experience building MVPs and working in Agile, is the focus that Antler puts on the problem. And James, I think you mentioned it at the start, is focus on the problem, not the solution. And I think there's a phrase, marry the problem, not the solution. And it kind of flipped the way that I was thinking about, how do you come up with a product or a solution? And that's where kind of Ian came into the picture. And Ian, I think he also came in with his own idea before the program, but during Antler, we kind of found that there was different things that we should be looking at. And Ian actually came up with the idea as a background with Gartner and understands trends, and the FinOps industry has been growing quite significantly over the last few years, and it's quite nascent in Australia. It's been going off in the US, and I personally found anyone who's bought cloud infrastructure knows how expensive it can get and how quickly costs can balloon. And Ian identified the problem. I had the experience of having to deal with this as a former CTO, and we kind of joined together to build Morphless and help you save money on the cloud. And it all kind of happened there, which was magical.
Okay, we invested in you probably 6 months ago, if I remember. I've got to share the story that like when one of the best bit of my job is when we get to tell people the positive IC decisions. Dom was on the call about 3 minutes earlier than his co-founder Ian, and it was really awkward. So I was like, well, I've just got to tell you it's a yes now, don't I? Because I want to try and have both of you there. But Dom was trying to encourage me to wind up Ian that we was actually going to be a no, but I didn't have the balls to actually do that one. So that's my favorite Morphless memory. But since that moment, like what's happened in the last 6 months, and then what have you got planned for the next 6 months?
Yeah, so look, it's been a whirlwind journey. We've built the product. The product is live. We built it quite some time ago, earlier in the year. We've got half a dozen to a dozen customers. We're bringing in revenue. It's quite amazing what you can do within basically 6 months. And like, just to be clear, I've got a brilliant co-founder with me in Ian. He complements so many things that I don't see or don't know, that allows us to find opportunities and value that I couldn't have done myself. And that's before I joined Antler. I was kind of thinking I could do it all myself. And then joining Antler, I think it became very clear that I had my own blind spots, and someone who Ian has a sales background. It's so valuable to have that complementary skill set to be able to bounce off each other. And we're continuing to grow the business. There's ups and downs. Every challenge has a win, and vice versa. But we're going in the right direction, and it's quite exciting.
Well, same for you, Joe. Like, what's happened in the last 6 months, and if we see you come Christmas time, what should we ask you about?
Are you okay? You should ask. No, look, I'm really lucky in that I found a co-founder who was as similarly, let's just get shit done as I wanted to be with this. And so we both came in really ambitious and really sort of willing to drive it as hard and as fast as we needed to get traction. And you know, the B2B SaaS is the sexiest area when you're building in sort of startup and tech land, and we're not B2B SaaS. And so we knew pretty early on that we were going to have a higher burden of proof and traction than other founders might. And so we've been pretty quick. We launched in January. We were revenue generating within sort of a week of going live with our first beta. So this is one of the differences of like startup land versus corporate land. Like, we did $10,000 of revenue last month, and you know, that's bad if you're running a grown-up company, but it's really good in startup land. And so we've been really, you know, there's probably 4 things that we've had to spend a lot of time doing. So part is building up our supply, so making sure we've got good quality education providers, and so I do a lot of that. Building the platform, which I'm really lucky. I've got my amazing CTO who has done all of that, and she's also super numbers focused. So she's been doing all of the tracking and the A/B testing, which has been awesome. And then, of course, there's actually bringing prospective students through the platform. So my sales and marketing background has come to the fore there. And then I think the other piece is fundraising. And the Antler guys sort of told us how time-consuming it is to go and raise money and how much you get rejected. And I am glad they told me that, because I think by the 10th no, I probably would have given up, except a friend and Antler told me you'd get told no 60 times. And so when we started getting yeses after 35, I was cheering, but it is really time consuming. And I think it's a delicate dance to both build the business, but to make sure you've got enough cash to continue to build the business, and there are some sacrifices to be made. So hopefully the question you can ask at Christmas is, do you still have enough money in the bank that you won't have to go and do fundraising again?
Good stuff. So I'm about to turn over to questions, so please warm up what you want to ask, either by throwing a hand up or put it into the chat. But just one brief answer for both of you. If you could wind back 12 months ago and imagine yourselves in your sort of corporate lives, what's the one bit of advice that you'd give yourself? Dom, I'll start with you and then go to you, Joe.
I mean, I'd probably advise myself to go to Antler earlier. So I probably spent about 8 months after leaving my corporate job trying to start my own business, doing it on my own, thinking that I've got a product, not really maybe understanding the problem space well enough. And so I think I would have jumped in earlier because there was a lot of things that I learned in the Antler program that I think helped, first of all, shift me away from the idea that I had originally, and then, you know, found like-minded people with Ian, my co-founder, who, you know, I could take this journey on together. So I just jump into it as soon as you practically can.
And Joe?
I should have been prepared for that one. It's a good question. Look, it's probably not advice, and we were talking about it just before everyone joined this call, that I think when you come from corporate, you're used to being the buyer. And so, you know, you don't get back to emails really quickly, and maybe you don't bother going back to people for a while when they reach out to you because you're busy. And then suddenly you find yourself on the other side of that equation, and you're the one who's like, hey, will you join my platform? Hey, will you be my customer? Hey, will you give me money? And so I think don't go to people, CEO Joe, you were mean by doing that. But also I think you've got to put yourself out there. And I think in corporate land, people come to you and you don't have to actively build a network. And then in startup land, you have to hustle when it comes to building relationships, and people are very generous in introducing you to more people, but it means you can't not get back to people within 2 days. You've got to be there and be present and really value the relationships in a way that I think corporate, particularly if you've got a brand behind you, is just not as important.
Yeah, you're starting from zero. You know, you might have this big reputation in corporate land, and, you know, big team, big budgets, and, you know, everyone knows you, but you're coming to people in the startup land. Nobody knows who you are. Who's this company that I've never heard of that only started, you know, 6 months ago? So you've really got to change your mentality to be, you know, lean in, front foot and really chase things down.
Fantastic. Right, so let's time for questions. So we have one that's come in on the chat from Jane. I'm sorry you're feeling unwell. What kind of time frame did it take you to find your co-founders, and like how did the process unfold? Like Joe, do you want to start with a bit?
I always say that my co-founder was my most successful internet date ever. And this is from someone who in my early 30s was a prolific internet dater.
I hope you didn't meet your partner on internet dating, otherwise you may be in trouble later.
No, that's a whole different story.
Okay, well, that's another time.
Funnily enough, I didn't. So we actually met on the Y Combinator founder matching platform, and you may guess I'm a tad of a type A personality. And so when Antler was like, you have to have a co-founder, I was like, all right, but you guys might have recruited idiots. So I started looking for co-founders prior to joining, so while I still had a job. And I met Yvette through the Y Combinator founder matching platform. I think we're one of the very few success stories from that. So while I would recommend having a look at it, I met a lot of really strange people, and a lot of people who are on there are not ready to go all in. And I think you have to have someone who's ready to go all in, because this is not a side hustle. Like and every time we've tried to have people help out or do an internship, it doesn't work. This is not a side hustle. So it meant that I found her. It probably took me a couple of months to find her, and then a few more months for us to work out that we wanted to work together. And then she joined Antler as an external co-founder in week 4, maybe, Rachel, I reckon. You let me bring her in.
Just before Trackout, yeah. So it was about week 4, I think.
Yeah. So I know you sort of said time frame, but also how did the process unfold? Antler gets you to do something called 50 co-founder questions. And also this co-founder DNA piece. Sorry, Rachel. I have to say that I find the 50 co-founder questions were really useful. So I did it with a couple of co-founders where we actually wrote answers. So we sat down, and it takes like 4 hours to write proper answers. So we would write all of our answers down, and then we would email them to each other, and then we would sit down and discuss them cold. Because then you don't accidentally influence each other with, oh yeah, I agree, particularly if one's a people pleaser, which I can sometimes be. That weeded out a lot of people who just had different expectations of what great looked like, who had different abilities to commit, who were at a different stage in their life, who didn't see values and culture the same way that I saw it. So if you're going through the program, or even if you're not, you can download it from the internet. It's publicly available, but it's 50 co-founder questions. I found that probably the single most useful vetting process. And then it's just working together. Even before you commit, you just have to work together, because someone can seem cool at a chat, and then when actually you're committing and you're getting on with it, you have to, because it's hard. Like you've got to communicate well, and you've got to spend time together. You can't commit until you've spent pretty significant time together, would be my view.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important relationship, the co-founder relationship. You really need to. It's probably the single most important decision that you'd make in deciding to start your business. I'd almost say it's more important than the question or the problem that you're going out to solve. You're going to be working with this person super close for let's call it 5 to 10 years, or whatever the time frame may be. You really need to kind of pick the right person. For me, I met Ian, it was, I think, a week and a half before the cohort actually started. Antler put on a drinks that Rachel kindly hosted. And I met Ian just casually through there. We didn't kind of hit it off. We had a bit of a chat and got to know each other, but it was probably, I couldn't really find anyone at the start that was kind of aligned with my idea, that they wanted to come join me, or they had an idea that I could kind of get bought into. And then Ian and I Ian came up to me. He's the type A personality guy. He's the sales guy. And he talked to me about the FinOps idea and saving companies money. And it was the first time that I had someone that was I was really resonating with the idea. And I liked Ian's approach. He was a good communicator. He was very on the front foot, go-getter kind of person. And I think, you know, we spent then some time together. We did the 50 questions, like Joe said. I think that's super, super important because the biggest issue in a co-founding relationship, you're going to have conflict. And the way that you avoid conflict is by setting expectations up front. And if you have the same expectations, and that's what the 50 questions do, you talk about, you know, what are your values? You know, how much do you expect to work? Well, you know, what kind of exit are you looking for? And really having your expectations rather than just going blind, you line up on your expectations, and that really helps allow you to have a successful relationship. So, you know, that's something that's really important. You got to focus on it and do it straight up front. In terms of timing, it was probably, I think, you know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I think, into the program that Ian and I hooked up, and the rest is history.
I watched the romance unfold. We literally were sitting next to each other for most of it, the four of us. So we actually did. The four of us probably spent quite a lot of time together.
Yeah.
Very cool. We've got a question from Chanel. Media startup. We're producing content. We've got lots of impressions. Has Antler invested in media startups? Will we be a good fit for Antler? I would encourage you to apply, and let's have the conversation around those ones. We've definitely invested in like media, ad tech, martech focus businesses. I think to give the kind of the super brief 30-second version of the what's VC backable or not. It's, can you see you're getting yourself to 100 million of revenue is probably the rough threshold. The background is a VC firm is typically going to look that each investment they make has the opportunity to return the fund that they have. Our fund's about 70 million Aussie, which is what we'll be investing into these ideas and what invested into Enroller and Morphless. If we're looking to, like, that means if you work it out we need to be able to deliver like to get 3x for our investors, we need to be able to deliver about sort of 200 mil of value, of minimum of value in our holding. You multiply those bits up, that kind of means that someone's getting to roughly like 2 billion, 1 to 2 billion market cap. Then if your revenue, if you're being generous on a SaaS multiple 10x, you probably need to be thinking you're in 100 million. So that's kind of how I'd frame some of those bits. And if it's a more consultancy type business, you just can't get to that stage without having thousands and thousands of people. So I think the key bit is it tech focused first, and then can we get to a scale? But Chanel, I encourage you to apply, and we can talk through those bits. Steve asks, I've been told that experienced startup is built from learning from your failures. What do you recall being your biggest learning moments from a failure thus far? Dom, if we start with you, and then we'll go to Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of mentioned it earlier that, you know, I was focused on the solution basically before joining Antler, and really the going through the Antler program in the first week, the shift and the focus on the problem was probably my biggest failing before joining the program, and really focusing on that. I think opened up a whole new way of looking at kind of what company I wanted to form. So that was kind of the biggest thing. In terms of since starting Morphless, you know, we're fairly young. I don't know that we've had enough time to make any major mistakes. I think we've been going pretty well. Ian, my co-founder, will refute that and say we're going too slow. But I think we're going really well. Yeah, nothing yet, but wait for my tell-all book in 5 years' time. Then I'll reveal all the secrets.
I look forward to the book Less for More.
I love that. That's great. Look, probably similar in that we're so young, we haven't had any big failures yet, but we have a million little ones. And I think that actually keeping, you know, what you've written in the question there at the front of your mind, Steve, is what's critical. Like we rebuilt our whole, so we measure everything, because optimizing the student journey is core to the success of this business. And so we tracked everything, and we formed this hypothesis, and Execs spent 3 whole weeks building the whole thing again from scratch, which I know doesn't sound like very long, but actually in startup land, 3 whole weeks is ages. And we launched it, and we watched it, and it was worse than the thing we just kind of like made up out of thin air at the very beginning. And so we had to kill it. And that sucks. But I think because you go into it with a test and learn test, and then failure isn't really a failure. It's just a constant series of hypotheses and tests that then teach you a lesson to inform the next one. And so I think having that approach means you don't double down on failure, because that's what really causes failure, is like, we've spent time and money on it, let's just keep trying to make it work, instead of like, okay, well, that was shit, that's sad, what do we do now?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, Joe. Like, be ready to let go of what you've done if it's not working. Just, you got to kill it. I have a harder time than Ian, but that's why it's great having a co-founder, because he's there telling me, Dom, kill it, it's not working, we've got to move on to something else.
So, Ian's the voice of Flush the Puppy. This is time to go for this idea.
Yeah.
Well, so that's possibly leading on to Sumit's question of staying solo versus looking for a co-founder. Did you contemplate on it? And if yes, how did you come to a decision? It sounds like having someone as the accountability partner to kind of keep you honest on stuff is definitely one major reason why. But like, what else went through your guys' minds in not staying solo? It sounds like both of you had starts at that.
Do you want to go, Joe?
Look, I 100% intended to do the solo, and now that I'm 6 months in, I would have gone and got a job. I think if I would have done this myself by now, it was really hard because it was my idea. It was really hard for me to give away 50% of my equity to my co-founder, but that's exactly what we did. And it was hard for me to get my head around that to begin with. And now I'm like, that's the cheapest. Like, that was one of the best decisions I could have made, because, you know, I got a $400,000 resource for half of a company that didn't even exist yet, who is freaking amazing at delivering things, who is the exact opposite of me, and yet who I get along with incredibly well. I couldn't have delivered financially what we've delivered if I'd had to pay someone to build the tech for me. It's nowhere near the quality or pace, because, you know, Yvette can change stuff with 2 minutes notice. I don't have to fill out a change request and then sign it off to get it paid for with an outsourced IT company, which is what I planned. So, and just emotionally, it's hard. Like, there's the first couple of months, it feels like you're working on a fun project, and it doesn't, and everyone tells you it's a roller coaster. And I was like, whatever, man, everyone's so dramatic. And then it becomes a business, and then it is a roller coaster, and the wins feel huge and the failures feel appalling. And like, everything is dramatic. And now I get it, that it is a roller coaster. And I think doing that alone, I don't know how people would do it. I think I would be in a job again if I'd gone and done it on my own.
Yeah, I can really resonate with what you just said, Joe, because I mean, going into it, I thought I could do it myself. Like, you know, the ego tells you that you're brilliant and you know everything, and you've run big teams and you've run budgets, and you know what's going on.
Yeah.
The reality is, you know, people have different skill sets and different abilities, and you don't have all of them. Like, it's a very rare person that has all of them. And finding someone that you get along with that has the complementary skills is well worth any equity split doing it. Because, I mean, there's not only just the skills, but you've also got, like you were saying, Joe, you know, there's someone supporting you there, so that you're not slackening off, or you're accountable to someone. And, you know, if you're struggling, you've got someone to turn to who's going to, you know, you're both going for the same goal, and you're going to pull each other up and push each other on. So I think it's pretty critical to do it together. And
I don't think any employee has as much skin in the game as a co-founder. And so, you know, Yvette and I both worry that we're the one not doing enough. And that's an amazing dynamic to have, where you both worry that you're the lazy one. And I just, you know, I've had some amazing teams, but it's not the same. It's not the same as having someone who is just in it. They're in it.
And the stats bear this out as well. Like 0.5% of unicorns are solo co-founded businesses. And there's tactical reasons about that, but I think a lot of it is actually these formative periods that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I didn't believe you guys when Antler first said that. I was like, oh, whatever. And now that I'm in it, I really, and again, it was ego. Dom's right. I was just like, can I run teams of like 600 people? Like, I couldn't do this on my own. But Yeah, I couldn't emphasize more strongly how important a co-founder is.
Question from Nicola. Hi, Nicola. Can I reply next year? Yes, we will look for some circumstances to change or bring something else in, but we welcome reapplications. David asks, at what threshold do you expand the startup team and in what steps? I think I'll start with probably the early bit of the reality of this is you should assume that for the first 12 months, it is you and co-founder and maybe a contractor on, I don't know, like design for a web front end if you're not a great designer. But the people that are actually in it for the first 12 months are just you and the co-founders should be your default. And then it's revenue generation and or fundraising that allow you to accelerate quicker than that. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
that's basically it.
Yeah, we hired a frontline course advisor a couple of months ago because we worked out that we could return that person's salary with revenue. But the reality is, if you can't return someone's salary pretty much dollar for dollar or then some in the month, you just don't have enough cash in the first 12 months. So you just don't have enough cash.
The other, sorry, Joe, the other thing that you can do, and we've done that at Morphless, is you can bring on advisors as well. And so we have an equity agreement with one of our advisors who is a FinOps practitioner, has been for 10 years. And he works with us on a regular basis where we can kind of ping ideas. He's not working in the business directly, but we certainly work very closely with him. So, there are contractors and people you kind of bring in, but as James said, the first 12 months, the two of you are going to be focused on it primarily.
And don't worry, things change after that. We've got business in the portfolio. We've got like well over 100 people working with them. But I think in this theme of corporate execs to start up, like the reality of the first 12 months, I think is an important one to get over. We have a question from Courtney. Joe, is Yvette based in Australia? And if you're separate, how do you efficiently work together?
So she is based here, but she's in Perth. So we actually met
effectively overseas.
Yeah, effectively overseas. It's a really long way away. But we have a daily, she says I'm not allowed to call it a stand-up because she's a tech person and it goes for more than 10 minutes and we are not particularly structured with it. So we have a daily meeting and we're really intentional about in-person time. So if, for example, I'm presenting at an Antler event at the beginning of July, then she'll come and meet me and we'll spend a week together in Sydney to really talk about strategy and planning. I was a bit iffy about remote, but actually it works fine if you're intentional about it.
Well, then we've got a question from the enigmatically named S. What's the minimum ownership that, for two co-founders in our team? One's got 91, one's got 10. We get this question quite a bit in different forms. Like the way I always start with it is you should be looking for someone that is worth 50% of the shares. They're the standards you should be holding for who you want to start a business with. What you end up agreeing at a different point, there's different things that go into each individual cocktail, but like at the very starting point, if you're thinking someone is only worth 10%, then you're probably not looking at the right person, I would argue, at the very earliest stage.
And I think we all value our idea significantly more than it's worth. Because once you're 6 months in, you realize that the idea is worth like nothing. Like everyone has good ideas, and when it's yours, you fall in love with it. But it's on a genuine value and equity basis. It's not worth anything until it's brought to life. And if someone can do 50% of the work of bringing that idea to life, then give them 50%.
The other thing you should consider is if you're working with someone and you've got 80% and they've got 20%. What's the dynamic going to be, down the track as the company grows? What kind of, resentment or other things are going to kind of bubble under the surface that are not going to get addressed? If you don't split it kind of equal, I think that there's things like that could start bubbling up and can cause all kinds of unintended consequences in your business. So, I think splitting it halfway is probably the best way that you can do it. And, 80% of a dead business is much worse than 50% of, you know, a $20 million business or whatever.
And the reality is, if you're building for venture scale, then you're hoping for an exit that is potentially certainly 7 figures, but it might even be 8, or it could even be 9 just for you. And so if a few percentages either way limits your ability to get there with someone who's fully invested with you, then, you know, if you end up walking away with 20 or 30 or $50 million, does it matter whether that was 30 or 40 and the other person gets 7? Like, I'm not convinced that it's, you know, if you're ambitious enough, then actually the variation doesn't matter. You're still really bloody wealthy at the end of it.
Well, there's last call for questions, but we look forward to visiting both of your yachts that come from the exits that happen. I just want to say, like, real pleasure to reconnect with you both, but also be sharing like the real unvarnished knocks, but also benefits of what it's like going through the journey. So yeah, as Ronnie's put in the chat, like, follow these guys on LinkedIn. There's some really good content. And we encourage you, if you haven't already applied for Antler, come join us, and we'd love to be building more businesses.
It's worth it.
Thank you, everyone.
It really is worth it.